All right, welcome back to the F3 Northeast Wake podcast. I'm your host, Blake Anderson, Money Pit. Back with me today, Chuck Klein, Goose. Goose, thanks for joining me back on the podcast.
Money Pit, I appreciate it. Thanks for the invite. Always good talking to you.
Yeah, love having Goose on. He and I have had a lot of really great leadership conversations. For those of you that were at the Q-Source table last year, you heard his wisdom week in and week out. And you could almost guess, if you know what's coming, why Goose is on. But this chapter is Q 4.5 failure. We're not calling Goose a failure by any stretch of the means.
Oh,
But
I would disagree with that statement right there. It's okay. I have failed my way around to all sorts of goods and bads, and right now back to good, I guess. That's probably the best way to say it.
yeah, you keep going long enough, right? You'll get there, right?
Persistence is a virtue, I think. That's one
You
of
just
the
have to
things
keep
that
getting
you
back up.
gotta. It's if you well, not to get too cliche on you, but here comes your first one. Is you define when that failure is, right? So if you some people say, hey, this is where the failure is. Well, I was like, well, no, it's halftime. You got to keep
Yeah,
going. So I don't
right.
know.
Well, I think John, let's just stick there for a second. So I like John Maxwell says you can either lose or learn. I mean, you
The
really only
failure
fail if you
is
give
if you
up.
didn't learn. That
Yeah.
is the failure. That is probably the ultimate, that would be one of the definitions of that is true failure is if you didn't learn anything, then that's it. And I'm living that right now is yeah, I just kind of I had that sort of thought today that yeah, that works in professional settings, it works in your personal life, it works everywhere that um yeah, if you didn't learn anything, then that is the failure. That is
Yeah.
failure.
I mean, you fall down, you skin your knees. As long as you get back up and keep moving, is it really failure or did you learn something? I mean, I think so, y'all know I got younger kids. I got 14, 12, but then a 2-year-old, right? And it's like I'm relearning some life lessons with my 2-year-old because in the grand scheme of things, we're all kids, right? And so
Sure.
I can think about the things like it feels like there's higher stakes on my decisions as a 44-year-old than a 2-year-old, but any different. Like my 2-year-old falls down, like it's not a failure. She's learning,
Why
right?
do you fall down? I mean, this is Batman, right? Batman, that was a why do you fall down? So you can learn to pick yourself up. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, is there any difference between her stumbling and falling down when she's learning to run because she's running now and she trips easy, right? And I don't run to her. I try to like get her excited to jump up and keep moving. But is that any different from me at 44 when I make a mistake or quote unquote have a failure? It's only failure if I decide though that it's a failure versus I'm just going to pick myself up and keep learning to run.
Yep. I will tell you where my brain went with one exception, which
Yep.
is, and that I read this in the Q source reading today, which is permanent failure. When an organization permanently fails or when a unit permanently fails, there is a, there are things where you can sit there and say, yes. We will still learn something, but there's some pretty significant, divorce is a permanent failure, and it takes two parts of that. Crashing an
Not
airplane
a
into the side
failure
of a
as a
mountain is a
not a
permanent
not,
failure.
not a permanent failure as a person, the divorce,
Yeah,
a failure for the
of the
relationship
organization.
of the
That's right.
organization. Yep.
So, anytime an airplane crashes, there is organizational failure that is permanent, but then there is still learning. And I think a learning organization, a healthy organization, will attempt to find that is a true. That is what I think a lot of people seek in their organizations and possibly in themselves, but definitely like you hear that term organizational learning, or are we in a healthy organization that tries to learn from our mistakes? That is an easy thing to say in a very difficult culture to encourage and develop.
Yeah. All right, Goose. I want to be selfish for a little bit. Okay.
Sure.
So, a lot of conversations I'm having, and I'm kind of pulling out some of the good stuff from our guests, but right now I want to learn some stuff. So, as
Okay.
y'all may know, when Goose talks, I listen and probably pull out my pen and start taking notes, especially when it comes to leadership stuff. And I've been sharing the last couple weeks of where I'm kind of growing as a leader is in the not just the delegation, I've been able to delegate, but in the taking the time to invest in a new leader, to give them the proper apprenticeship so that they can have the opportunity, but then ultimately that you have a safe environment for them to push it to failure, right? And
Yes.
I've led teams for years. I've trained plenty of leaders, but I'm going to say this is where I need to grow a little bit in my leadership. I feel like I have rushed past apprenticeship for lack of money or lack of time. And I want to pull out of you a little bit because you're someone that's got a career of not of leading and learning to lead and being taught by some of the best and teaching some of the best. So I want to press into failure a little bit and I want to learn and hopefully our packs will too. So, let's talk about the LDP because you were taught this formally, right? So they have schooling, apprenticeship, opportunity, failure. So head
Mhm.
learning, followed by some heart learning by watching someone else, get your hands on it, followed by a safe opportunity to be able to try what you've learned, and then ultimately failure is like you're given the free rein to make a mistake, right?
Yep.
And what's your experience been with that? Like, do you agree with that setup? And like, tell us some stories of when it's gone right and when it's gone wrong.
Sure. Boy, that is it takes me right to a thought process of I had I was a squadron commander and one of my mid-level managers he was in charge of the entire maintenance department. So a big responsibility, but he did a fantastic job. I recommended him. I gave him the highest recommendation to be for promotion and to have his own squadron and to go out there.
And so, real quick, you
Yeah.
literally put your life in his hands every day because
Oh,
he
yeah.
whether he maintained like your life depended on whether he maintained
Yeah.
the plane or not, right?
Every single day. Yeah. That's a given. And we can get in. That's a whole nother conversation of what does trust but verify and how do you trust and you can't verify. Like
Right.
there are worlds in there that trust but verify is not really a thing, but it kind of is, but not really. And anyway, this guy, I will call him Ryan.
Okay.
He screened for command, and he is now on his way. And now he is out as a young executive officer in one of our operational commands, and he's actually out on deployment right now. And he called me, and he was like, "I'm having a real hard time. This is really hard." And I was like, "Yeah, it is real hard." And he made a little bit of a mistake and he kind of put himself in sort of an awkward situation and he's learning. And I don't know. I it's just there's no real message right here other than it's just the sequence of it's the process. It's we stand on the shoulder of giants and he's now, moving into the place where I was. And at least it's fun to it's like watching your kids like now and he's got his own squadron and he's making mistakes and I was like yeah it's that one's a big one. It's not the end of the world, but we're gonna have to you gotta you maybe broke a little bit of trust there. You got to start rebuilding some trust and it's gonna take time. It takes 10 seconds, 10 years to build trust and 10 seconds to break it kind of thing.
Yeah.
um so I have experience with that, and it's been very recent, and that happens all the time. And I'm not sure if that's just an aviation thing, or it's a military thing, or it's just a wonderful opportunity that I have. But I can tell you, yeah. And I guess what kind of additional questions or what sort of things
Well,
that,
okay.
like, how do I? Yeah, I'm trying to think. There's
Let me
some sort
poke
of
on
thing you're looking for. I didn't scratch the itch.
let me poke on you a little bit. So background for those of you just catching up to Goose's story, if you're new, Goose, Navy pilot for a long time. Okay. Trained younger pilots, now trains, now is
I
back in
trained
the
the now
complete.
the youngest of pilots.
He's training the youngest of pilots to be the future Gooses, right?
Yep. Yep.
And so, um, I mean, there's a lot at stake in this training, right?
Yep. Oh
People's
yeah.
lives are on the line and millions of dollars of equipment are on the line.
Absolutely.
I
Yep.
give someone some leadership responsibility. Maybe the biggest mistake someone underneath me can make is like 10 grand. Okay. Hurt me a lot, but it's not like they could lose their life, limb, millions and millions of dollars, high stakes stuff. Right. So how do you ultimately feel comfortable trusting someone with the opportunity where failure is a real possibility and terminal failure is a possibility. Like, what's it take to get there for you as a leader to feel comfortable to give them that?
It is, I think, a knowledge that they have gone through our processes. So there is things I can put on a piece of paper and say, yep, this person has received this training and has gone and done this study and done, there's a qualification process for these kind of things. That is very, it's not necessarily black and white, but it's much more black and white than the other part, was the subjective. What is a gut feeling? And that's where you kind of, I think, as a leader, or at least in my experience, how does one make decisions? Well, everybody has decision-making processes, right? You have, hey, I'm going to write down the goods and others. I'm going to make a list of these things, and what are the risks associated with this? I'm going to flip a coin. Everybody has like a list, and that some of them are very conscious and some of them are subconscious. And then ultimately, if you navigate those different lists of how, or those different processes you have for making decisions, inevitably, if you're still sort of stuck, you always end up getting to that one, to the very bottom, which is like, it's a gut feeling. Everybody talks about a gut feeling. Well, that's because I think, you've exhausted all of your other more logical, your brain slowing that thought process down, and here's all my logic. I still couldn't get to a decision. So what does my gut tell me? Okay.
So you ever had a leader or pilot that checked all the boxes and you got to the end, you're like, not ready. Sorry. Not gonna let you
Oh
do it.
yeah. Yeah. That takes a level of or maybe I think yeah, that I can probably sit here and say yes. You either in a daily event where I'll sit there and say that did not that event. Let's take like one little small, like one event. Like I get into a flight, or I get into a simulator event with a student, and I'm like, nope, that did not hit the marks that we're looking for. I can either objectively say, look, you're supposed to do this event or do this checklist at this time, and you didn't do it, and that's a violation of our training rules, and it's all black and white. Or I can also sit there and be like, if I pass this student, that means, first of all, my name means something.
Right.
That's an important thing I think a lot of people need. Like if your name doesn't mean anything, well, what are we doing here, right? But if I sit there and say, yes, I think he has passed this event, he meets all the standards that we have sort of associated, we've kind of come together and said, yes, this is what this person needs to do to pass this event, and they can move on. Um, but it's a gut check. It's a gut check to sit there and say, like, okay, you know,
What are
they
you
will
looking
make a
for?
mistake.
What are you
They
looking
make
for?
it. No one has ever gotten into any flight event or simulator event and done it perfectly. It's never happened.
So
And so
what
you have to sit there and say, like, well, was that just a little small mistake? And hey, we're learning. And look, he or she just did better, and they learned from it right there in front of me. Maybe they had no clue they were making a mistake until you sat there and debriefed, and you kind of see that light bulb come on, and you're like, okay, but this is acceptable. That's an acceptable mistake, and they can learn from it, or they're just not picking it up.
so
And yeah,
so it sounds to me like you're kind of feeling out their confidence,
yep,
you're feeling out their awareness,
yep,
right? Because ignorance is a problem, right? You can
yep,
be confident, but if you're ignorant and you're not aware, that's a problem, right? So
yep.
you're feeling out awareness, confidence, anything else that you're kind of like
Emotional
monitoring?
regulation,
Okay.
your ability for us in aviation is the ability to still fly the airplane under duress
Hmm.
and make appropriate decisions. So choose the right course of action and also make risk assessments. Those are
Hmm.
a lot of big words right there, but that is when we sit there and make evaluations and saying, like, is this person ready to move on to the next level or phase of training? Those are all things that I can sit there and be like, yep, this person's confident. That doesn't necessarily mean they're not arrogant. They're also not, they make a mistake, and they bounce back from it, or do they what we call snowball? Do they get worse and worse because they've made a mistake and now they can't get over that mistake and they move, we call it
So
snowballing.
what do you to you, what's more important, the gut feel or that they check the boxes?
Yeah, I think you need both. I think if you don't have both, like either we'll call it gut feeling, either a subjective, somewhat emotional, but it's based off of your knowledge as a more, for me, a more experienced aviator to know, being like, does he? It's the right stuff. Does he or she have the right stuff to move forward? And or am I going to regret sending this person forward and saying, you know what? This could lead to eventually either an accident or mishap or like a serious failure, possibly a terminal or a permanent failure. Okay, well, could I have done something to stop that? So that's the more subjective side of it. That they don't have a checklist for that. But if you try to only use the logical, here, well, we did all the stuff right. Okay, well, there's so much that is not incorporated in checklists. We just can't write everything down.
Yeah.
Every instruction manual doesn't have all the sort of stuff. So you need that sort of emotional, subjective gut feeling to kind of fill in the gaps and really paint a full picture of what, for me, what that pilot or, take your organization, like how that person's doing. There's all the there's all the objective, like, yep, they check all the boxes, but I don't have a good feeling about this. Do you
Hmm.
know that, like, that's maybe the same thing,
Yeah. All right, let me get your hot take on a couple of these things that Dredd says in the book. So he says, kind of in the bold headline at the beginning, failure is the crucible of the leadership development process.
right?
So I guess we're kind of saying, when you're learning to lead, it's inevitable. You're going
Yep.
to get there. You're going to fail. It's
The
it's not about
next
if, it's about when and how you handle it, right?
I think the next statement is actually even more where it's like a crucible. So what? It is the forge by which a leader is purified through the burning away of me first. That
Mm,
is a
yeah.
that's the that's a lot more like, okay, like, hey, what does it mean to be a crucible? Is we have to put you under it, and we're making a sharp blade, a honed blade. I put you in a fire to get rid of the impurities. And then I take that blade out and then beat on it, failure, until you get firm and hard and strong. And then that's a cycle. And I there's a podcast with a guy, Dry Creek Wrangler Club, I think. He's an old cowboy, and
Mhm.
he's like, how do you make a really strong blade?
Mhm.
You put it on the fire, you take it out, you beat on it, and you put it back in the fire because it gets rid of those impurities again.
Mhm.
Beating on it doesn't get rid of the impurities.
Yeah,
In the
and
fire is where the impurities
think
go.
about it. You made a great point. The early in a leadership career, it's about me, it's about my reputation, it's about acknowledgement, it's about promotion. But the best leaders are not even thinking about themselves anymore. The best leaders are what does my team need from me, and what's the result that we're getting to, and my reputation will just shake out in the success of the mission, less of I'm trying to save face. But a leader who's in it for themselves, who's trying to get that recognition, right, probably hasn't failed enough to have the motivation purified, because the leader you trust is the one that's not just looking out for themselves. The leader they trust is the one that's caring for the team and trying to get them to a successful outcome.
I agree with that. That my brain went to two things, which was, I think there's something in society which is like me first. Like there's
Hmm.
just something there of like, if you took some of the average people, especially in the Western hemisphere, it is very much like a me first mentality.
Hmm.
And that drove a connection to a book I just finished reading called The Road to Character. And I'll
Okay.
get you the author later, but it's fantastic, which is it discusses a lot of people in the first phase of their life. They ask a question: is what can I get out of life? Like,
Hmm.
how can I work as
Hmm.
hard as I possibly can to get the most money, to get the
Yep.
biggest house, to get the whatever.
Yep.
And then I can tell you personally, I've gone through this sort of shift, and I don't know if it's my own failures, and like it's a beautiful process, but it's very painful of when you turn around and say, well, what does life need from me?
Hmm.
And if you can fill in that, if you can align what you're doing with to answer that question, and I can tell you, I have done that, and it is not a fun process. It's a very painful process, but and that is attribute that to the glory of our God,
Mhm.
frankly, of He provided something for me. But the piece that has come out of answering that question is be like, what does life need from me? And I think the answer was like, I need you to go teach these little baby pilots how to do
Mhm.
their thing because you did it for so long, and that has been it's kind of made all the difference for me.
And I think failure is wrapped up in that process of becoming. Like the story you told about the honing the blade, not because God wants us to fail to be humiliated, but because it's through the experiences that our character is forged, where now we have something really rich and powerful to give back, and we start to realize that it's the harvest reaped from the seed sown of investment in other people. That's the real riches of this life. But how would you have anything really real to give them had you not gone through and failed yourself in your own right?
Yeah, and then here comes a cliche on top of a cliche, which is, I just heard this today, which is you don't. Let's see if I remember it. It's a you don't. You find I'll paraphrase because I can't remember. It was very well said, but it's you find joy in the seed you sow, not in what you harvest.
Yeah, that's
Like
right.
the joy is in the process of going out there and putting the seeds in. You can't control what grows. Like you can a little bit if you provide, if you provide nourishment, if you provide the appropriate water. But in the grand scheme of things, like you could do everything right, and all that crop doesn't grow. And
Mm.
so, where's the joy? Well, I still went out there and did hard work, and I did what I was supposed to do. I was a good person. I had strong character. I tried my best, and I failed.
Yeah.
And what did I learn from it?
All right, next hot take. Failure works best when it stings the most. Failure works best when it stings the most.
There's a huge caveat in there, which he's like, as long as it doesn't, let's see if I can find where that was written. Ferris Forged, there's
Two
one,
214.
but you got to get up.
Yes,
You
yes,
have to get up.
yes, yes.
There are people, I've met a lot of people in life, and I have maybe not necessarily struggled with it, but I think this last failure I've gone through, this one I was a little worried about not getting up. Every other failure I've had, specifically flying, I have surprised myself at how well it has turned out. And I think I'm starting to see that happen again on this one. This was a big one. This one I lost something you can't replace kind of thing, so permanent failure. But even then, like, I was actually watching an interview by Stephen Colbert, and he said a very beautiful statement, which was he was like, he's learning to love the thing that he wished would never happen. And then on top of that, if you can find beauty in God's punishments, that is a very powerful place to be. That's a very emotional, very good place to be. But um, yeah, and that's where you get into perseverance. You get into the kind of character that, what kind of character do you have, and the ability to just sometimes you're like and I learned that back in college of sometimes you have to get through the next hour.
Yeah.
That was my college experience. Again, maybe I don't recommend it, but I remember there were days when you're just like, I am just trying, and I think the military does that too. There's some SEAL training, Ranger school, like the heavy stuff. Like you're out there and you're like, I am just trying. You would break the day down into, I'm just trying to get to lunch. I'm just trying to get. I will do what do I need to do to get to lunch? And then, hey, what do I need to get to do to get? But Navy SEALs, they talk about that a lot. They're like, you got to focus on the evolution that you have at hand. And some people, they're like, what are you thinking about right now? And he's like, I'm in the push-up position. That's my next evolution. And I'm just trying to get through this. I'm trying to do it the best I can, is do these 20 push-ups the best
Yeah.
I can, and I'll focus on the next thing. Like that's compartmentalization. That's breaking down very complex things into very small stuff. And that's when things get real heavy and real difficult. Sometimes you have to say, you hear people say that a lot is like, just take it one day at a time.
Okay, final question from the leader's leader. We've been kind of building up to this. Ultimately, we're talking about training other leaders, right?
Okay.
We're leaving a legacy of leadership. We're training a leader to replace us or to build our organization. How how do you stick behind a leader who's failed, knowing we don't want them to fail, but ultimately, if we're with them for the long term, we're going to have to accept that they will, and we're going to have to stick with them as they do.
Ooh, okay. That is a very difficult question to answer because I don't have the answer. I think I my
Because you can't
this one
fire them
came
every
out.
time
This
they
one came out
fail.
of my answer for that one. I think is coming out of church, and I learned it this weekend. So that was it's Tuesday, but um, if I think you're in an organization that has having trouble or failing, or if you think the direction is going wrong, there's options, and it's not there's everything from don't do anything to the nuclear option, right? And
Mhm.
generally we want to avoid the
Mm.
those two. If you just sit there and just take it and just say suck it up, like that's not going to improve the organization, and it might things are probably going to get worse. Um, Bad leadership, this again from the Road to Courage. Bad leadership is such more, it's not an equal sum game. Like if you do one good thing as a leader and one bad thing as a leader, everybody remembers the bad thing. They don't remember the good thing. Like that's the thing to remember too. So it takes, 10 good things to equal one bad thing or whatever that ratio is. We'll figure that out later. But
But you can't fire a leader just because they make a mistake.
that is correct. That
Ultimately,
is
for them to
also
continue to
that is the
grow,
paradox and the struggle of the boss is not always right, but they're always the boss. So you can hope and pray that your boss is receptive to um, course correction. I tried to do that. I think I did a pretty good job, and because on day one I was like, I need to know when I need to know if I'm not wearing, the emperor with no clothes on. I was like, someone needs to tell me when I messed up and tell me that. Like I cannot, this place breaks down pretty fast when if you're not willing, if I do not have an environment where you don't feel comfortable enough to come up there and say it respectfully, and there's ways to do this. Like, please don't do this in front of the junior enlisted folks of calling me out when I make a mistake, but I will definitely be receptive when I make a mistake.
yeah, I think what I'm trying to get out of you is you got a young leader that you've been training.
Oh, no, I'm
He
looking
makes
at it
it.
and I'm like, you're
You got a
failing. Oh,
you got a
yeah.
young leader who you've been training. Ultimately, you're going to have to give him the opportunity that he might fail.
Yeah.
But in it's easy it's easy to either never let them get the fail, but then you never grow because then you're doing everything,
Yep, that's no good.
or they fail and you just fire them and say that's I don't want to have to keep putting up with it. But ultimately, there's got to be some long-term commitment to the people you're training if they're ever going to get to a place where they can replace you or lead, without you.
Yeah. Uh, there's actually a worse one, which is they hurt themselves.
Yeah.
And that's where
Right.
you look at your kids and say, like,
Yes.
hey, if you're walking in, traffic or hey, you're about to touch a hot stove, like I can let you fail and you could really hurt yourself permanently, or I can, sit there and hover over you and protect you and wrap you in bubble tape and you're never going to live a good life, right?
Right.
So
Right.
that we look at our kids probably the same way. That's where are we about to make a mistake that is permanent? It is
Mm.
like it is considered like a worst case scenario. Are we about to crash? Like for me, are we about to crash the airplane? Okay, man, I can't let you go to that. I will
Yeah.
give you we again in our world, I say like how much rope am I going to give a student to let him go out there and not like I don't want you to hang yourself, right? Like I want you to go out there. I need you to learn. I need you to make mistakes because that is the best way to learn. But I can't put the airplane in jeopardy. I can't put you in jeopardy, and they don't know. They are not gonna. They're gonna put the airplane in a situation, and they just didn't realize it because they're still learning. There is just just driver's ed, that kind of stuff. So that's where you have to have that sort of the experience, the knowledge, the communal knowledge to sit there and say like, okay, where is that point where I can't recover the airplane? Where
Yeah.
is it in
Right.
this business? I can't, this is, and they need to know that and be like, okay, um, they don't need to know that. They know they're like, of course they don't want to crash the airplane. It's not their intent to go out there and crash an airplane, but they're overwhelmed, they're struggling, it's just very difficult. Okay, I'm here to protect you. I'm going to let you go to this point, and then that's it. I got to take the airplane from you. I got to put it back into a safe place, and
Yeah.
then let's talk about it. Maybe we need to go land and talk about it on the ground, and let's try it. Maybe we'll try again, or maybe we need some more training, or
Yeah, I think
yeah.
I think probably what I'm gathering from that and thinking through my experience is you don't get to the end of the LDP and it stopped there.
Oh no.
This is an ongoing culture,
Oh yeah.
right? Where you're always training, You're always sowing into them with investment. You're always giving some new opportunity. You're always giving room to fail, and then you're always starting again. Right? And every
Yep.
leader that you're responsible for on the backside of failure is, okay, where do we need to work? Do you need more formal training? Do you need me just to spend more time with you? Do you need more kind of supervised opportunity? But we never assume that we're done. We give failure that's non-terminal failure and then continue to sow into them as they grow through the LDP.
Absolutely, and you have to get like from a military perspective, especially again in military aviation, the cycle is it's a beautiful cycle where they start off as students, they go and do an operational tour, and then they come back as instructors. And you can always look at an instructor in that phase where they're the senior person responsible for keeping the airplane. That's when they actually learn the most. They learn so
Right.
much more as
Yeah.
an instructor because they have to elevate their game.
Right.
That's where I think if you're like, I'm a senior person, I'm looking for to mentor a junior leader. If you can have a plan in place where you're like, okay, hey, I'm gonna guide you through this thing. I'm gonna let you go sit make some mistakes and kind of figure some stuff out. And then at some point, now I'm gonna put you in charge of people.
Yeah.
Or like like now you're in charge of training. It actually makes the process that really elevates their game because now I'm like now you need to know so much that how do you train the trainer like
Yep.
that's
Right.
where like that's the thing that I don't know if there's a civilian counterpart or equivalent to that, but that's where that has been something where that's where you talk about that cycle is like okay, it's actually that middle phase when you're like, hey, nice job, okay, now I want you to teach that person over there what you learned, and they go, oh. Yeah, and they have that moment where they're like, "Oh no, I'm
Yeah,
not
you're
ready," and
right.
I'm like, "Yeah, well, you better go get ready."
That's right. Well, let me tag that as we close. I've heard it said, the teacher learns the most,
Oh yeah,
right? And if you want it, that's probably the form of the end of the LDP is have the person you've been training go teach someone else, because that's when it will really lock in that learning and help them take that to another level of the things they know to do, but now once they've taught someone, they know it to another level. Well, Goose, I appreciate you coming on to talk about failure, man who's had to train leaders with some high stakes. So, we miss you over here in the Northeast Wake region, but, good to see you again on camera, and I appreciate you joining this week for the podcast.
Money Pit, I appreciate it as always. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you soon.
Yep, Pax, we'll see you this week at the Q Source table.